All right, we're going to go ahead and get started, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. And welcome to North Bergen Beer Baron, The Life of George Affuso. Before we get started, just a quick reminder, please save your questions until the end of the presentation. You may either use the chat box or the Q&A when asking your questions, and I'll read them aloud at the end of the presentation. I want to give a quick thank you to the Hudson County Office of Cultural and Heritage Affairs for sponsoring tonight's presentation. And I would like to, without further ado, introduce our local town historian, Michael Mering. Michael?
Thank you, Chelsea, for that lovely introduction, and thank you, everybody, for joining. Welcome, right, to this very interesting story we're going to analyze tonight. We are going to take a look at the beer baron of North Bergen, George Affuso. He is a legend that, of the 20s and the Great Depression era and the Prohibition era that has kind of fallen by the wayside to history. And we're going to take a look at this, mild-mannered man's, rise in the world of crime. And it all takes place right here on the streets of our very town, right? So it adds this whole other human interest to it. So, without, dragging on a little more, it's no secret, right? And again, if you're from North Bergen, there is this kind of aura about North Bergen. And there's tough guys in every North Bergen memory, right? We all know of a guy who was the tough guy in the neighborhood, who was a fighter, who was kind of a bruiser. And, George Affuso is going to surpass all of them. Okay, he is going to be, and again, I'll say it right now, and people will get mad at this, but he is the toughest guy in the history of this town. What we're going to see is this kid who is born to two immigrants in what we know today as the jungles section of North Bergen, right? We don't really call it that too much anymore, but today we know better as the Meadowview houses, right? So he's born over there in the jungles. Okay, that's a rough neighborhood to be born into. It's a kind of a shanty town. There's not a lot of amenities in the town. There's not even a lot of utilities in the town. So it's rough living. Now, we don't know too much about the Affusos from that long ago. We know that his father, Paolo, was he worked odd jobs. And he was just a general laborer, which is kind of par for the course for people in the 1920s in that part of North Bergen. George, growing up there, would have gone to Lincoln School. Now, we know he gets out of Lincoln School, right? You see it on some census records that his highest education level is 8th grade, right? So that's the furthest he gets. And it makes sense because, like many people during this era, George is sent to work. Again, doing these odd jobs and kind of general labor things. So we don't know really what he does or where he works in his young ages, but we know that in 1917, he joins the North Bergen Police Department. Now, I know that's weird because I'm talking about a guy called the Beer Baron, and I'm talking about how tough he is. And his first major career choice is to become a North Bergen police officer, right? He is the 31st officer in North Bergen, right? Now that's pretty amazing, right? Police department comes into, adaptation in 1907. Here we are 10 years later. He's the 31st guy, right? Third badge number 31, right? So he works this job for a year. And then all hell breaks loose in Affuso's life. There's a gentleman, and I use that term very loosely, by the name of Vincent Gaffney. Now, Vincent Gaffney, he's not from North Bergen. He is this influential racketeer from New York City, part of the Gopher Gang, which was this gang that ran out of Hell's Kitchen. And Gaffney's claim to fame is that he was arrested for murder in New York City and escaped the infamous tombs, right, in New York City, right? Have you ever seen Law and Order? They always say, well, take him to the tombs. Yeah, well, Gaffney broke out of there, and he was on the run for a good part of 1918. And he didn't run that far. He actually holed up in North Bergen. So after this manhunt, he's arrested there. And that's when things get fishy. So Gaffney is brought to the North Bergen police station, right? Which in 1918 would have been current day town hall. So he's held there for a day. He's turned over to the New York Police Department. When he gets to New York, and this is where there is this confusion of what happens. He leaves North Bergen in handcuffs in the custody of several New York City police officers. When he gets to the jail in New York City, as for some reason, they checked him again, he has a loaded revolver and 5 extra rounds in his pocket. Now, both Gaffney and the New York Police Department all claimed that a North Bergen officer gave him the gun. And it was at this time, the blame fell right at the foot of George Affuso, right? Nobody from North Bergen bought it. Everybody jumped to his defense, right? Chief Leonard Marcy defended him, saying that, look, he's a good guy, right? Lieutenant George Cash, right? Very famous in the Prohibition era. He defends him. He says, I've known Affuso a long time, and he's perfectly trustworthy. He says the NYPD is actually making him a scapegoat because Gaffney, and then this is a direct quote from the Jersey Journal, made him look like boobs. Captain John Semin, right, again, touted Affuso's record is one that we should be proud of. So the real question is, how did everything fall at his feet, right? Why are we blaming him? And even Affuso himself says, listen, I never even talked to the guy, right? I never spoke to him. And again, Chief Marcy placed the blame on the New York City police officers. He said it's their fault. So this gets covered nationwide, this story. Over the next several days, the Gaffney incident, as it's referred to, was investigated by the county prosecutor, this man named Pierre P. Garvin. Garvin was this tough Jersey City guy, no nonsense. And, he is going to really try to make an example out of Affuso. And this is going to play into a much larger story down the road, because Garvin is going to be the man single-handedly in charge of keeping Hudson County dry during Prohibition. So these two will cross paths again. So Garvin, again, promises if there's enough evidence, Affuso's going to trial and he's going to face a jury. So the investigation goes on. Garvin will side with the New York City police officers. And he says because the stories never change, right? These two detectives from New York, their story just is always the same. And then even Gaffney, kind of matches their stories a little bit. And again, this is kind of a hearsay thing. It's he said, she said, or he said in this case. So Garvin is going to take him to court, right? And they're going to bring him in. So they bring in Gaffney, they bring in these detectives, and the grand jury hears all this stuff. And this looks like it's going to go south for Affuso real fast. The North Bergen Township Committee, which was led by the Commissioner of the Police, James Nolan, he even comes out, he's like, listen, in the Township of North Bergen, Affuso's done nothing wrong. We are dropping any charges in the Township of North Bergen. There's no charges. So the town is still behind Affuso, really, which makes this a bigger deal that they're trying to pin this on a North Bergen police officer. So Affuso goes in and, the first day of the trial is at a deadlock. The jury's like, nobody really knows what's going on. The second day of the trial, there's a courtroom bombshell, right? This man from Hoboken, Peter Costello, comes forward kind of on his own and states like, hey, I gave Gaffney that gun several weeks ago. So he's had it for a while. The jury was like, whoa, what? It's a continued deadlock. So Affuso is a free man, right? There's talks of a retrial that are going to be set as Garvin wants to get more evidence and figure out what this Peter Costello story is. Well, trouble's not over for Mr. Affuso. He goes back to work. He goes back and gets in uniform and gets ready to protect the town of North Bergen. something happens between him and another patrolman, a patrolman by the name of Frederick Geiger. Um, Geiger accuses Affuso of passing the gun to Gaffney. That leads to this huge brawl between the two of them. And Affuso, again, being this kid who grew up in an extremely rough part of North Bergen, he really sticks it to Geiger and he puts him in the hospital for several weeks. Geiger needs a steel plate put in his head. It's bad. He really gives him the business. But another officer who was not named stepped in and said, listen, man, there was a fair fight and Geiger really pushed his buttons. So the police said, well, the North Bergen said, we're going to stay out of it. And it became a civil case and Geiger took Affuso to court. So Affuso actually goes to court and faces two juries in the same day when he's retried for the Gaffney incident and then the Geiger case. And he's acquitted of both of these charges. So what is he to do now? We don't know what happens in 1919, but we do know that he leaves the North Bergen Police Department. Now, we don't know if that was under his own choice or if that was a decision made by Chief Marcy, but he's gone. So he purchases some property on Kennedy Boulevard, on present day 59th Street and Kennedy Boulevard. And he turns this place into a restaurant and he names it the 101 Ranch. And again, the 101 Ranch was named for this traveling Wild West show. And that was kind of the way you named things back in the day. They were named for geographical landmarks or they were named, catchy popular things. So he builds the 101 Ranch. Now it's 1919. This is a bad time to open a bar. Prohibition will be starting in 1920. But Affuso, I think, has this larger plan in play here. So he has the idea to turn it into a speakeasy, right? Or, that term's not around just yet, but, he's planning on running this thing, regardless of prohibition. He fixed it with up-to-date amenities. He claimed it had North Bergen's largest dance floor. They had live entertainment every night, okay? Business was good for him. The bar was popular amongst the people who lived in that area, and it's on Kennedy Boulevard, so it had a lot of traffic, right? You had a lot of patrons coming over from the West New York side of Kennedy Boulevard. So he had a packed house every night, okay? He is going, and again, like I said before, Pierre Garvin, the Hudson County prosecutor, he's got it out for Affuso. And his first act in cleaning up Hudson County is to shut down the 101 Ranch. And he raids the ranch on June 8th, 1921. Now, he finds some alcohol. He was trying to find some alcohol, but instead what he walked into was like poker night. And there was a lot of money on the tables being exchanged. Now, Affuso, in the sense of crime syndications, he's kind of small potatoes at this point. But he's got people around him who are extremely loyal. And his two bartenders, they took the rap for it. They said, no, we're hosting it. He has nothing to do with it. And this kind of catapults Affuso into this world where he is now, in a sense, this boss of an area. He becomes like we looked into the de facto kingpin, right, of North Bergen. There's really nobody else here trying to make moves in the area. So Affuso is the guy that people will go to. Couple of years later, or again in 1921, Affuso gets into an incident with two guys in Jersey City. He beats them up again, right? The judge in the case is like, you know what? You are pretty popular in your community. People really like you. You have all these people that showed up to the court. You're free to go. But the next time you're here, you're going to spend 6 months in the county jail, okay? The next time he was in court was not very short after. Now, the public opinion in the Jersey Journal, the writers there, they're starting to turn on this guy. Now, we don't know why they're turning on him. He's just some guy from North Bergen, but I'm sure there was some other play here. He's dubbed a bad man by the press, and he's arrested under the charge of highway robbery. Him and his gang would hold up multiple delivery trucks on Kennedy Boulevard, Hackensack Plank Road, which is now Tunneling Avenue, Patterson Planks Road. And again, it was these guys who were all from the jungles, right? This was kind of his crew that he ran with. So they're all held without bail, right? The judge is embarrassed. He wants to make a point now at this point and make Affuso pay. So he goes to trial and he's found guilty and he's sentenced for 2 to 3 years in the penitentiary, okay, in the state penitentiary, right? So this is like, now, look, okay, Affuso's like, all right, I'm going to jail. I got to figure out what I'm going to do. So before he leaves, he sets up a series of stills throughout the jungles section of town. And he puts a couple of people in charge of running the 101 ranch and a couple of his other bars. And there's this agreement, make sure that the liquor keeps flowing while I'm gone. Okay. And it gets so heated for resources that even in the jungles, there is this kind of bitter war between George Affuso and this another gentleman very popular in the neighborhood there, Albert Runny, who Albert Runny at the time was known as the king of the jungles. And the way they used to crown the king of the jungles was they literally have bare knuckle fistfights, before they toned it down and had just like general elections to name the king of the jungles. So, Affuso and the Runny family, they're going at it with each other over control of the water wells in the community. It gets so bad that there's Affusos and Runnys ending up in jail. Al Runny's daughter, who is dubbed the princess of the jungles, is even locked up, right? When the dust settles from this kind of war, Affuso's in complete control. And he now has the complete respect of everybody in that neighborhood. Again, he is the man in that neighborhood. So his influence, again, in this area is growing stronger every day. And it seems that the law had finally caught up with him, right? So after his sentencing, right, now he's still waiting to go to jail. He's got a lot of, I don't know why they would wait this long, but he's released on bail for $10,000. And again, $10,000 in 1923, that's a large chunk of money. While he's out on bail, him and his crew, they know they're going away for a long time, 2 to 3 years. They go to make another big score, right? Affuso and his boys go up to a real estate office in Palisades Park and they rob the place. And as it's reported, Affuso and these guys walk out of the real estate office and they see 2 Palisades Park police officers. And the police officers have some words with Affuso, and Affuso says this to him. This was the quote. He said, I better look for safer quarters if there's going to be any shooting. And the Pal Park police officers are kind of left stunned that they have no idea who he is, right? They're just like, this guy is like, he's talking about shooting. So they're a little freaked out. Affuso jumps in a car and they go through this wild chase through Pal Park. And then as they're trying to make their way back to North Bergen, they're taking corners, they're speeding down streets, right? There's car crashing, right? And again, he's identified and he's arrested by Lieutenant Cash, right? The one gentleman who defended him not too many years before. Affuso then is going to get a couple more years tacked onto his sentence, and he will spend 5 years in training in the state prison. His operations are going to fall to his rivals, right? Especially this one man by the name of James Egan. And all Affuso could do was kind of wait to be released. And then he returns to North Bergen in the fall of 1929. Now, when he returns, it's not a quiet return, right? This is a big to-do when he makes his way back, to the jungles, right? There's fanfare. He gets a hero's welcome when he returns. There's reports that the entire neighborhood came out to welcome him home. Again, during his time away, the area grew more and more dilapidated. Right now, we're looking at 1929, and we're at the onset of the Great Depression. So things are not looking good in this area of North Bergen. They're not looking good in Hudson County in general, but in this area, North Bergen, not looking good. So there's this constant discussion too that they're going to redevelop the area, and this big factory moves in, the Perryman Electric Tube Company. They're going to move in, kind of where Castle Furniture used to be. They were there before the furniture company. So Perryman Electric is there, and they're robbed 2 weeks after Affuso gets out of jail. Okay. Now, the story goes that 3 men are going to enter the building. They're each carrying guns. They're going to steal radio tubes and the payroll, which was about $11,000. Okay. And again, in 1929, $11,000 between 3 guys, that's a good chunk of money that you're going to have. Now, the money was found in the Bronx in an apartment with 3 gentlemen. And the radio tubes, well, they were later discovered in one of George Affuso's storefronts, which kind of sold odds and ends. So Affuso's picked up by the police, and he's labeled the Finger Man. Right now, I wasn't sure what this was. When I first saw this, I was like, oh, are they trying to say he blamed him? No, but a Finger Man in the 20s was the guy who engineered the burglary. Right. And this theory came up from the North Bergen police. And then the 3 men that were arrested in the Bronx, they basically say, hey, Affuso came up with this plan. We met him in his bar, and he came up with this plan to rob the Perryman Electrical Company. Now, again, the Jersey Journal pulls no punches. Affuso, who has a criminal record, according to the police, served 2 terms in the penitentiary, is reputed to be a hijacker. They continued that Affuso's record, according to the North Bergen police files, date back to September 2010, when he was 16 years old. He was fined $5 for disorderly conduct. The next year, he got a suspended sentence for the same charge. And in 1918, it goes on to the case with the Gaffney incident and his problems with Frederick Geiger. Then again, they continued that in 1920. He was arrested for maintaining a disorderly house and violating prohibition laws, right? When Garvin kind of broke into the 101 Club. And then again, they go into the 1923 arrest for the burglary in Powell Park. So, I think what the Jersey Journal is trying to do is they're trying to paint this picture as a bad guy. But in 1929, the Depression's coming on. He's looking kind of like a hero to people that are in the area, right? So they continued that he must be resorting to these stealings now because there's been a drop in the temperature. And when the temperature drops, nobody's going out and drinking anymore. So they assume, or they make the claim that Affuso is actually looking for a new revenue source. Now, along with Affuso, 5 other people are arrested. One of them explains again that this whole plan was made up in the restaurant that Affuso owns. Another one, the 101 was named the Rendezvous. So he names it the Rendezvous, which is kind of ironic. All right. And then the heist is planned there. Affuso gets out, $15,000 bail, no problem. Pays it and walks right out. That's on October 23rd, 1929. 6 days later is Black Tuesday, and the crash starts, and the Great Depression kicks in. And that's it, right? That's it. This court case is dismissed, and it's just forgotten because the country's on the teetering point. Now, Affuso then kicks his beer running business into high gear, okay? Prohibition is still being enforced at the onset of the Depression, right? Beer and alcohol become high demand provisions, okay? He is linked to several occasions, 3 of which, I think they're pretty, 2 of them are really funny, actually. He's linked to this one truck, it's 5.5 barrels of 5% beer, which is pretty high for back then. Is stopped outside of a cafe on Bergen Avenue. And they're like, listen, this is an Affuso truck. We know it's an Affuso truck. And the way they knew it was an Affuso truck was Well, George's brother was driving it. Then his again, they found another truck in Union City abandoned shortly after the arrest of his brother with 28 half barrels of beer. Then there is another truck found several days later with 177 barrels of beer, again with within Affuso driving it. Again, it was no secret that George was the man in control of northern Hudson County. Anything that could have been done, or excuse me, let me rephrase that. Anything that people needed, they went to George Affuso. Okay. And that's in reference literally to anything anybody wanted. But there was some competition amongst the people there. Now, the way he took care of this was he became kind of a man of the people, right? And in the jungles and the surrounding neighborhoods of North Bergen, like I said, they didn't look at him as this bad guy. They saw him as kind of like the unofficial like leadership in town. Even more so now, again, as they entered the Great Depression, right? Affuso was way more generous than this position that was held in every town. Every town during the Depression was given funds to distribute to people, and it was dictated by someone named the Poor Master. And people knew Affuso would give you more money for your family than the Poor Master did. And that says a lot about the guy in some sense. Mayor Julius Reich had the North Bergen police watch Affuso and the jungles around the clock. At any time, the North Bergen police could be found there. And oftentimes they were found in Affuso speakeasy, right? Now, Affuso was known to offer aid to anyone who asked, and he knew that being a man of the people would protect him and his growing business venture in beer running. Now, this is all going to stop. This just comes right to a complete stop in December of 1930. Affuso goes to meet with that rival, James Egan, right? Egan has really moved into his territory, and Egan's this guy out of Sea Caucus who is trying to really make a name for himself. He opens up a rival speakeasy down on Tunnelly Avenue, present day, the corner of 76th and Tunnelly Avenue. He opens up the Hamilton Chateau. Again, very similar to the 101 Ranch, or the Rendezvous as it's known at this point. Dance floor, live entertainment, open all hours of the night. So this guy's looking to kind of squeeze Affuso out. So he's already in cahoots with a lot of the Bergen County guys, Anthony D'Agostino and Joe Mazzio. These are guys that are beer racketeers, and they're not in good standing with Affuso, and Affuso's not in great standing with them either. So there's a meeting that's set up at the Hamilton Chateau. Now, the reason this meeting is set up is because about a week earlier, somebody tries to set the Hamilton Chateau on fire. James Egan assumes it's George Affuso. So they all meet up on December 30th. It's a crowded night in the place. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning, and bullets start flying, right? It's estimated in the reports. One report said there was 10 shots fired. Another one says there's about 15 shots fired. 2 people are struck with bullets, right? Out of 35 people in the restaurant. George Affuso and his bodyguard, James Rivoli. Affuso is shot in the stomach and Rivoli is shot in the leg. Again, when there's a shooting, all hell breaks loose. Everybody's running out onto Tunnelly Avenue. All right, a little different than what we know, right? It would have been a non-paved road, and it's 2, 3 in the morning. There's nobody out. People are spilling out onto the street. Affuso's crawling out of the bar. Rivoli is looking for these people who shot his boss. The North Bergen police show up, and they arrest everybody. Everybody that's there gets arrested. Men, women, guys in the band, the bus boys, the coat check girl, like everybody gets arrested because they're like, we need to know who did this because this is enough. Right now, the line has been crossed. Chief Marcy came up with 3 different theories to what happened that night. He says, listen, either Affuso provoked the attack, D'Agostino provoked the attack. That's theory number 2. Or theory number 3 is that Affuso stood accused in the gangster code, right, of hijacking DeAugustino's beer trucks. Now, these are the theories. Now, we also have 2 weapons found at the scene, 2 pistols. One is found in the street, tossed into the kind of the curb, into the gutter, and another one is found in the basement, right, thrown down the stairs, they're assuming. Now, Marcy goes to the hospital with George Affuso, and he says to him, George, what happened? And Affuso says to him, I don't know where I was when I was shot. I might have been inside, I might have been outside, I don't know where, right? So again, Marcy presses him and he said, who did it? And Affuso, like a typical gangster in a gangster movie, he doesn't name names. He doesn't say, hey, Egan is there and DeAugustino's there and Mazzio's there. He doesn't tell them that, right? The police are going to find that out through, old-fashioned detective work. Now, Marcy knew the chateau was owned by Egan, so he assumed this was, a muscle war in a sense. Marcy then orders both of these places padlocked. He's like, listen, shut these places down until we figure out what's going on. The West New York Police Chief, Charles Hangley, also closes another one of Affuso's bars that's on the corner of Jackson and 62nd Street. So they're shutting everything down. Okay, on December 23rd, they find James Egan and they arrest him. They said, listen, you're getting charged with the shooting of George Affuso. So that same day, the reporters go to the hospital. They tell Affuso, hey, Egan's been arrested. And then Affuso does it again. He goes, I don't know who shot me, but I'll take care of the man who did the shooting, right? So he's throwing that threat out there, right? They press him again. They're like, come on, tell us, you got shot, you saw who did it. And he says to them again, I don't know who shot me. And I wouldn't tell you if I did, right? This is a guy, he's a tough as nails kind of guy. And, listen, he knows this, he knows what he has to do. Now, Affuso is going to remain in the hospital. There is security everywhere. And the hospital he's in is the old North Hudson Hospital in Weehawken, right? Weehawken police are there. North Bergen police are there. County police are there. And there's even state police there throughout the building because they are not taking any chances at what could possibly go on. However, no amount of security, right, is going to help Affuso, right? He's shot in the abdomen. He was given massive amounts of drugs to ease the pain. He was not going to survive, though. He died from his wounds on December 29th in 1930. When they performed an autopsy, they found a .32 caliber bullet inside of his stomach. And now the county has taken over the case and they're looking for who fired that gun, right? Again, the 2 guns found at the scene were not .32 calibers. The county added a theory that Rivoli might have shot Affuso by accident during all the shooting. They don't really know because they couldn't find Rivoli's gun and he refused. He said he didn't have one. I don't have a gun. Now the investigation's going on, it's underway. There's a funeral to be held for Affuso, and it's very, odd, ironic, whatever you want to call it. But as Affuso passes away, the Catholic Church passes a law. It's basically an anti-gangster law that the Catholic Church passes and says they will not hold funerals for known lawbreakers. So he cannot have the funeral, right? Which is a big deal. This is an Italian Catholic, right? He cannot have the funeral in the church. This is a crushing blow to the family. Affuso's casket is instead put in the living room of his home. It's rested, the report said, on this elaborate flower-decked stand. The funeral was attended, this is a direct quote again, by a number of well-known characters, as well as a number of less prominent persons from the North Bergen jungle section, right? And again, even as this guy is dead, the Jersey Journal is still throwing shade at him. The funeral was massive. His funeral procession was made up of 40 cars. He had a 40-car funeral procession, and 8 of the cars, or 8 additional cars, were flower cars. So the procession was given a police escort. They drove through the jungles. They drove down Kennedy Boulevard into Grove Church Cemetery. Again, the journal described it like this, that a narrow grave in Grove Church received all that remained yesterday of the grinning, rowdy bad boy of gangland who violated all the rules of his own except the one not to be a squealer, right? So again, George Affuso was not going to be a snitch. As the funeral procession made its way through North Bergen, people lined the streets, right, to see Affuso one last time. Father Leonard Bugatti of Our Lady of Libra did the funeral rites in the cemetery. And then there's even reports that Affuso's friends from the North Bergen Police Department were in plain clothes, right, mixed in the crowd of people. A crowd of 250 people made their way to the gravesite that day. They commented a lot on his wife being upset, as they lowered the casket, right? And then there was a noticeable absence of the big name New York gangsters from the funeral, right? And that's because Affuso was always at odds with them, right? He knew, in a sense, the value North Bergen had as a gateway in and out of New York. And I think they, and again, there's all these stories from down in Shady Side about, liquor coming in and out of the old ports that were down there. And I think Affuso really knew the value of the territory he was in charge of, to the point where he would put his foot down with a lot bigger players than he was. Now, the funeral's over, the investigation continues. The state of New Jersey cracks down on Hudson County hard. They shut down 25 suspected speakeasies, and it's bad when they shut them down. But by January 23rd of 1931, James Egan has posted $10,000 bail. He's back at the Hamilton Chateau. He reopens it as a Chinese restaurant named Moi Pai's. And after several months of investigating, they can't hook Egan to the crime. So Egan's acquitted by the grand jury, and the murder charges are dropped, right? So to this day, we still don't really know who shot George Affuso, right? Nobody was really tried for it. James Egan, at this time, prohibition's ending. He kind of loses his influence in the county, and he kind of just becomes a muscle thug for whoever is going to hire him. And then he's going to pass away in 1937. He's going to be killed in a car accident. And that's kind of the end of it, right? 1937 is the last time we're ever going to see George Affuso's name come up in the newspapers about this crime, about his legacy and all these things. But today, right, he's history. His reputation disappeared with him, with the shifting demographics in town, right? His legacy definitely was gone once Meadowview Village was completed. But he's the stuff of gangster legend, this guy. He operates several speakeasies, right? The 101 Ranch, the 49 Club, Radio Frank's. We know these are places he owns and operates. He controls the flow of beer and liquor in and out of northern Hudson County. And again, he fought to the death to keep it that way, right? He was a racketeer. He was a bootlegger. He was a heist man. He made North Bergen his territory, right? And again, if you know anything about mobsters, they're given areas and stuff. He took it for his own. He said, this is mine now. Again, right? We shouldn't be celebrating a criminal, right? That's not right to do, right? But Affuso's story is just too interesting to overlook, right? And we peel back so many stories here in the history, in the historical society, and this one was just jumps out of us, right? And he's a lawman turned gangster, right? It's a story we don't really see in real life, right? It's the stuff of movies. The gangsters of the 1920s, they're a piece of American culture, right? Chicago has Al Capone, New York City has Lucky Luciano, Memphis has Machine Gun Kelly, and now North Bergen has the beer baron, George Affuso. All right. Thank you guys for coming and hanging out with me for a little bit in my house again. I always think that's a lot of fun to do. I'll take a look at some of these questions. I see Tom, yes, are there any funeral procession pictures? Unfortunately, no, there weren't. There were no pictures of the procession. So, It could have been just there were no photographers there at the time, or it could have just been, they just did it too fast. But if there's any questions, I'll gladly take them.
We'll give them just a couple minutes to ask questions. Don't forget, you can put those questions in the Q&A or in the chat box. I'm just going to give you guys another minute to ask any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Tom, or whoever, all panels. I'm not sure. I think it was Tom who put that. Thank you. And again, right, guys, this is I always thought this was pretty interesting stuff here. Again, just to understand, North Bergen during the Depression and during Prohibition, it was not for the weak. It was not a place for meek people, timid people. Where was he buried? He's buried in Grove Church Cemetery on 46th and Kennedy Boulevard. Yeah, and a lot, the name Affuso, the name Runny, they're very North Bergen names. They have a long history in town. So yeah, they're kind of integral to the town's development in some cases too. Yeah, the Affuso family, when we brought this up, a lot of people said the dugout, and it's not they're older. George is a little older than the Affuso dugout family, but listen, I'll call Netflix and see if they'll pick up my story. I mean, I'll gladly take some Netflix money. So.
All right, if there's no further questions, Michael, I'd like to thank you very much once again for coming out tonight to do this wonderful presentation. And I'd like to thank everyone who came to attend as well. Thank you for spending the evening with us. All right, have a good evening, everyone.
All right. Good night, everyone.